Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sons of Sequoia podcast.
Sons of Sequoia, March 12th, 2021. Here we go. How you doing, David?
I'm doing pretty good. We got a big storm coming our way here in Colorado. So I went to the grocery store. I got all my provisions. I'm just hoping no major property damage happens and we can get through it in one piece.
Yeah, because they say there's going to be a lot of snow.
A lot of snow, 3 feet or so.
Yeah, for people who don't live in Colorado, that we do get snow, but it's not that way all the time. People think we live in snow 24/7. We don't.
Mm-hmm.
So this will be a big one. It'll come, it'll go, and that'll probably be the last snow of the season. And we haven't had that much snow.
No. So today, do you know what we're talking about?
Yeah, you had the thumbnail up, volleyball, sex cults, talk about NXIVM, the Vow. The Vow was a movie about NXIVM, about, what was the guy's name?
Keith Raniere.
Keith Raniere. That he had a lot of people take vows, I guess, that part of his organization, I'll put it organization, group, whatever you call it, and there was a movie about it, and I think he's in prison now, isn't he?
Yeah.
But anyway, the history of that and the story of that is extremely interesting, and there's some very good lessons to learn. And we see some parallels. I think we see parallels today of what Keith Raniere did in this organization that he developed and he grew and it changed and everything over time. But I see a lot of lessons. And I think the lessons, it's not alone. He's not alone. There have been other stories just like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's good to talk about them.
So should we watch the trailer before we get into our discussion?
Before we get into it, let's watch the trailer. It's a good idea, David.
Okay. Let me pull it up real quick.
If we understood the world and if we understood ourselves, that's worth everything.
ESP NXIVM is a methodology that allows people to optimize their behavior.
NXIVM is the umbrella company. Keith was the founder.
He was a legend.
Our main belief is to have people experience more joy in their lives.
It's a worldwide organization.
When conventional solutions don't work, maybe the unconventional way of thinking does.
I was looking around at all these people that just didn't seem joyful. I started to get concerned.
There's a secret organization in NXIVM. They sign a lifetime vow of obedience, and they're branding girls.
And they're trying to recruit other women to do this.
I'm so strong. Like, you'd never be able to do what I just did.
I always want to earn my authority.
There's a lot of things about the organization. It's just not right.
Our commitment is our power. You stay.
There's no good way to leave. Ever.
I have to expose what's going on. It just has to be stopped.
There are a group of people we're going to the press. We are filing criminal charges.
You're branding my wife.
Everybody is a blend of good and bad.
We're playing some sort of game. Chances are I'm going to win.
Nobody joins a cult. They join a good thing.
There you go.
Wow. That was good. That was well done. It was good. They could have said more than that, but it was a good trailer.
Mm-hmm. So let's look at the definition of cult. Just.
By the way, at the very end was the word cult mentioned, and it was mentioned by Raniere.
No, that was Mark Vicente.
Oh, that was Mark said that?
Yeah, they had Raniere's face, but that was Mark Vicente.
Okay, Mark. At the very end, the trailer mentioned cult.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, I think that could be classified as a cult. And so, because everyone called it that. But yeah, let's see what the definition of cult was.
Okay, so a system of religious veneration and devotion directed toward a particular figure or object. In this case, that would be Keith Raniere, the cult leader. a relatively small group of people having religious beliefs or practices regarded by others as strange or sinister. That would be like if you had a Wiccan coven. And, they go out into the woods and they rub mud on themselves and they chant incantations and they're worshiping whatever Wiccans worship. And of course, I may be mischaracterizing what a Wiccan coven looks like, but a Christian would say, "Oh, they worship the earth spirits. They're Satanists. They're cultists." So there's not like a central figure like a David Koresh or a Jim Jones or a Keith Raniere, but because their religious practices, their sacraments are out of the mainstream, they become a cult for that reason.
Well, I think the key words there are strange or sinister.
Mm-hmm.
That it's not healthy and it's not good. I think that's the key.
Well, strange could be healthy, just people don't understand it.
Mm-hmm.
So in the Western world, if you go to, especially like you're from Oklahoma, you were born in the 40s, if you explained Hinduism to them, they would say, that sounds strange and sinister to me, but Hinduism is not a cult. Hinduism is a religion that's adhered to by nearly as many people as Christianity, and it's polytheistic.
Well, in the deep South, in Oklahoma, and Catholicism was strange to a lot of Protestants.
And I mean, I didn't grow up in a church or anything, but when I went to a Catholic mass for the first time, it did seem like there was a lot of rigmarole going around with the smoke and the preacher doing the things, and I guess it's the same too for the first time I went to a synagogue and saw a Jewish ceremony or whatever, saying stuff in Hebrew, and it's strange to me. If it's not what you think is the right way to church, it's going to seem strange, even if it's Judaism or Catholicism. If you're a Protestant, everything except for Protestantism seems strange. I'm thinking of when we went to the Baroque Chamber Orchestra at that Lutheran church. I think we've told the story on the podcast before.
Uh-huh.
And I asked you, is there a big difference between Lutheranism and Episcopalianism? And you're like, no, not really. And this lady turns around, she was probably from the Lutheran church. She's like, oh, yes, there is. Because when you're a member of the Lutheran church, those differences are very important. But if you're looking on the outside, if you're on the outside looking in, Lutheranism and Episcopalianism are practically the same thing.
To the Baptists, they're very similar.
Mm-hmm. Well, to a non-religious person.
To a non-religious person, they're very, that's some.
As
some
a non-religious person, I'd say Methodism, Presbyterianism, Lutheranism, Episcopalianism, Catholicism. I mean, I could identify more differences in Catholicism and the branches of Protestantism. I could see a difference there, but not that much of one. It's the same religion. But the differences between a Presbyterian and a Methodist, I couldn't tell you.
Well, there are like 30 different types of Baptists. Just Baptist. And there are like 20, 30 different types of Baptists, from the Anabaptist all the way through the Free Will Baptist. And there's just Baptist. There's all different kinds. So it's not really about the religion so much. It's the people. The people choose to worship in a different way. The third one, though.
Oh, yes.
A misplaced or excessive admiration for a particular person or thing. I think that's kind of what we're talking about today, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes, and that's sort of when people say, oh, the Republican Party has become a cult. Donald Trump doesn't really have the conservative values that have driven conservatism for the last 30 or 40 years. If he goes against those traditional values, and conservatism, almost by definition, is conserving those values. But if he goes against those values in a policy initiative he wants, like I want to give people $2,000 checks, Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell says, we're conservatives. We don't just hand out money. That's literally communism. And the conservatives or the Republicans, they become a cult. So it's like, well, the conservative value is don't hand out free money. That's literally communism. But Trump says he wants it. Therefore, what he wants is more important than my stated political beliefs. So it becomes your admiration for a particular person sort of supersedes your ideologies. And I think that's what happened to a lot of people in NXIVM in the bizarre volleyball cult called NXIVM. That was covered in HBO's The Vow. So
the other thing that happened too is, and we see parallel. When I say parallels, I meant like in the Republican Party and Trump, but even in The Vow, Raniere. And if you notice, this is another thing that I've noticed, like in The Vow and Keith Raniere with NXIVM. It started with joy. We just want to bring joy to people. We want people to have come to a place where they will be recognized and they will have peace and they will have joy. Now, if you stop there, who would not want that? Okay. And they start in a place that you can't disagree with it. Everyone agrees with it. But once they get in there, as this trailer was saying, well, once you're here, you're beginning to actually have an excessive admiration for Keith Raniere. And so then it began to turn dark. And he would brand him. You have to take a vow. You have to give up all your money. All of a sudden, he owns you. Okay, well, wait a minute. That's not joy. Your joy is in me. Okay, and so a lot of that began to change. Well, look at what a lot of things Trump said. Trump said, oh, well, they are Republican in name only because they're not on my side.
They don't support me. Yeah, it's not what they believe. They could be the most conservative person in the world, but if they don't support him, they're a Republican in name only.
Yeah. So his Republican is me. So when you start focusing on one person, then all of a sudden, that person, that's moving in a direction of a cult.
Yeah.
And that's why George Washington said, no, don't call me
king.
What do you say? King. I'm not. And he's going to step down, let someone else come in, because it's the people's republic. It is not the leader's republic. And see, Trump was trying to say the opposite.
Well, I think, like you say, Trump with conservatism, and then there are Republicans in name only because they don't support me, even though some of the things that I support are almost explicitly not conservative or Republican, but I am the Republican Party. I think Keith Raniere did that with NXIVM as well. It's, do you want to maximize your joy and minimize your fear? And then all of a sudden it's like, well, I'm not joyful. Like, I think in the trailer you had Bonnie say, I looked around and I saw a lot of people that weren't joyful because they're in a high control group. He's controlling their calories. He's controlling their sleep. And they say, I don't know if I can do this. Yeah, maybe you're not strong enough. You know, maybe you're just ruled by fear and you don't want to have joy. But you sort of say, I will provide you joy. And you think of joy as an emotion of good things happening to you. Well, he gets you into the cult and he redefines joy as doing what I say.
And Bonnie was one of the first ones to say, wait a minute, what you say and what we're doing, they don't match. Okay, well, that doesn't go along the lines of excessive admiration for a person or thing, because whatever they say goes, no matter what it is. And she was the first, in the movie, she was the first person to actually question that.
Yeah, because they went back and they had people in the 90s, as 25 years ago, that left. And their lives were ruined by litigation because Keith had a big war chest behind him from the Bronfmans, who were the heirs to the Seagram's liquor fortune, one of whom, I don't know if both of whom, one of whom went down with the ship. So a lot of Keith Raniere's minions, I would say, the lady Nancy, that was the teacher, they just turned state's evidence and sold Keith out because they knew that it was a big con, but they were, second in command, third in command. All of his generals and colonels, they flipped on him. You know, if he was a mob boss, they flipped on him so that they could stay out of jail. Well, his financier, she went down with the ship. She did not testify against him. She got herself a hefty prison term because she was still a true believer. And as she was getting sent to prison, she issued a press release that says, "I still believe his teachings can help the world." And it's like, you're heading to prison, lady. Like, what other evidence do you need that this was a bad idea? But if you're in a cult and you truly believe it, excessive devotion, like in the definition.
Well, one thing we say in this podcast is keep on talking and listen more than you talk and try to understand what the other person is saying. And we'll say that when we sign off, right, David?
That's right.
But then, wait a minute, let's try to understand her. Why did she stay loyal? Did she see something there that was better than anything she had before? Did she see something there that really was something to her was worth going to prison for?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of people in this world, and everyone in the world. You and I have a pretty nice life, David. Mm-hmm. We have each other. We have Laura and we have Michael, and we have a family that's close knit. We've had a good history, and a lot of people don't. And so sometimes these cults give some people something they've never had before, and they will go down with the ship. So there may be reasons why she did that, you know. So it's easy to judge everyone, and it's common to judge everyone according to your experience.
That's true.
But you haven't been with theirs. You don't know what their experiences are. So I just throw that out there.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good point. And I have a point that I like to make that. So the Bronfmans, they financed Keith Raniere, and he ruined hundreds and hundreds of lives with his cult. But I like to make the point that their father, who was the guy that built up Seagram's Liquor, he probably destroyed more lives than they did by selling poison to people. And what is alcoholism if not a cult without a leader? You know, I mean, Karl Marx liked to say religion is the opiate of the masses. But I think in America, alcohol is the opiate of the masses. And that's not to say, like, because there's people that dabbled in NXIVM and then they got out and they weren't in the high control group. They didn't move to Albany. You know, they may have gone to a meeting on the West Coast and said, "Oh, it's interesting," you know, but I think I'd rather go to yoga class and, you know, have my chakras read or whatever. They're those types of people. They're curious about alternative modalities of achieving enlightenment, but they didn't full send NXIVM and end up in a cult. And there's people like that with alcohol, too. They can go out on the weekends and they can have a couple drinks. But there are people who ruin their lives. They go on 4 or 5 day benders. They alienate themselves from their families because they could go down to the local liquor store and buy a bottle of booze. And so people like to say the Bronfmans, yeah, they went to jail, or one of them at least went to jail, and she deserved it because of what she did with that cult. And it's like, well, maybe her dad deserved it, too, for what he did with his big company. But it's just the difference is that one's illegal and one's not. But the suffering caused, I think, would probably be far greater if you look at where the money came from.
Yeah, that is a point, David. But then again, you could say the same thing about Henry Ford making the cars. How many people die in car accidents?
That's true. Yeah.
So it's a good point. It's a very good point. But and I actually, it's a good point, because where do you draw the line?
Mm-hmm.
What is making alcohol a cult? Is what Keith Raniere did a cult? Was what Jim Jones did a cult? And where do you draw the line between that and making alcohol and making cars? I think humans, people, our society, I think you need to have a close-knit society where we watch out for each other And I think that we have to, how can I say this? Well, I know that our family is very close, and I think that it's hard for any one of us to do anything without all of us knowing or all of us putting our 2 cents in, right? And so who cares for us more? Our family for each other, or some person out there that we don't know that can say, we can give you joy. And say, oh, wait, you can't give me any more joy than I have right now with my family. You know, you can say it's more, but it's not. So I think a lot of it is I guess where I'm trying to go with this is creating a family unit and creating any kind of family unit where people love each other, support each other, and is always honest with each other and care about each other. I think that's the solution to a lot of these things that are coming down the pike, because some people need what these cults have.
But NXIVM is a family unit, wouldn't you say? NXIVM becomes your family unit. NXIVM becomes everyone you associate with, everyone you know, all of your business partners. They're all NXIVM people.
That's right.
And one of my favorite scenes, I think I could pull this up. This is the cast. Of course, it doesn't have the bad guys. These are the ones that probably HBO paid. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So Keith's not on here. And then Nancy, I believe her name was Nancy. And then Nancy's daughter, Lauren, they were the bad guys. And then the Bronfmans obviously are not on here. So this is just, and the documentary, by virtue of, these people, Anthony, that's Nippy, I think.
Yeah.
Remember him? And Sarah Edmondson, Bonnie and Mark, and then Catherine Oxenberg was the mom. I think if they're listed here, HBO might have cut them a check, if that makes sense.
Could be, yeah.
And therefore, these people are the good guys, quote unquote, in the documentary. But Mark Vicente, he was Keith's right-hand man for years.
That's right.
And I think he only got out because his wife, Bonnie, said, this is not right. She was one of the first people in the documentary to see something that was not right. Of course, Keith had been doing this for years. And one episode that I really liked that a lot of people, because I think that you noted this and Laura noted this, it started to drag in the middle. They start unfold like, wow, this is getting, and then they told some backstory in the middle, and it's the documentary started to drag. It was 1 or 2 episodes too many, because a few of those middle episodes were a little boring. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
But I did like when they talked about what Keith did before NXIVM. Do you remember what he did?
No, not really.
He ran a multi-level marketing scheme, which is like a pyramid scheme, called Consumer Byline. And he Consumer Byline Inc. So it's basically like Herbalife or Amway or any multi-level marketing scheme where Keith would make the money. But what he did was he ran this scheme in 1990. And what he did is he got people to come in and he promised them the world, you're going to make so much money. Of course, in a pyramid scheme, only the people at the top make money. So when everyone ran out of money, or when time came due for them to make money and they didn't make any, the whole thing fell apart. And Keith Raniere got investigated by 20 states. New York filed a lawsuit alleging the organization was a pyramid scheme. He signed a consent order permanently banning him from participating in a multi-level marketing scheme, and he had to pay a $40,000 fine. So I think what he realized was, you can't promise money, because if you tell someone the check's in the mail or the money's coming, you just have to sell more product. And then they sell more product and you say the money's coming, you just have to sell more product. Eventually they're going to say, this is BS. I've sold so much product, I should have $15,000 in my pocket and I have zero. And they're going to quit and they're going to revolt, and then you're going to get fined by the state of New York. If you promise joy, you can say the joy is coming. You just have to do some more work. You have to do a few more classes with NXIVM. You have to sign up for a few more of our programs, our intensives. I think that's what they call them. You have to come here for 4 days. You have to fly to Albany at your own expense and then pay us to take more classes, and then the joy will come. And it's sort of like religion, like we tell evangelists, where I'm going to try to heal you of your malady. And if you're sick after I'm done doing my thing, it's because you didn't have faith. You know, if you go through the program and you don't feel joy, that's a failing with you, not a failing with me. The program works, but it only works if you do it the right way. And that's sort of how he was able to get people on the hook. And it's like, oh, it's too bad you're still not feeling joy. You know what would make you feel joy? Giving us more money. That's how it always works, right?
Mm-hmm. Very good point. Very good point. And that is very, very true. Very true. And so he really did control people. He began. You had the point is that initially he's offering joy, and so people who need that joy, who doesn't, they come in and they find it a place. But then when that joy comes from a person or a thing that you worship, then all of a sudden it starts going dark. And there's parallels of that too. I saw a documentary on Jim Jones and I thought, wow, when I was younger, and I thought, wow, you know, this is something that everyone should, it should be required for everyone to look at and study. And now NXIVM is another one. NXIVM did something very similar, except Jim Jones, the end of it was pretty abrupt. But those kinds of things can happen with any organization, with someone at the top.
Yeah.
And so I think and it's happened in countries, it's happened in religions, it's happened in groups like NXIVM or Jim Jones Church, and so it's happened over and over and over again. So I think when we teach our children about math and reading, writing, arithmetic, and everything, and how to play fair, I think when they get older, I think we should also teach them about things that have gone wrong, and this is how they go wrong, because there was a lot of young people in NXIVM.
Oh yeah,
and they're teens, late teens and early 20s.
Well,
and there's where you're vulnerable.
The interesting thing is because he had been around, he started NXIVM in the late 90s. And this was 2020 that the documentary came out. The people from the late 90s and the 2010s, they had fallen by the wayside. I think they aged out because it always was a bizarre sex thing. And it's kind of interesting. When we watched One Night in Miami, Malcolm X, he was facing friction with the Nation of Islam because Elijah Muhammad was the leader of the late Nation of Islam. And Elijah Muhammad had young girls stashed in apartments all over Chicago that he was going around having sex with. And Malcolm X was a devout Muslim. And he said, this doesn't track with me. I know this guy is the leader, but that doesn't seem very Muslim to me to have women stashed all over the city that you go and have sex with. And I think it's a rare person that can have people eating out of the palm of his hand and wants to be the leader that tells people how to live their lives. Because I think that if you want to tell people how to live their lives, there's something inherently different about you. I mean, I don't want to tell anyone how to live their lives. I couldn't imagine telling thousands of people how to live their lives. But if you are that type of person, I think you may have a greater likelihood of turning it into a weird sex thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Because everyone, it was a good point. Good point, David. Everyone has talents and ability and intelligence, and also every person will have influence over other people. You may not think you do, but you do. And so the question is, some people want to expand that more and more and more, and some people don't. And so some people, when they expand it, well, it gets deep inside of their character. Do they just want to be good, or do they want to just satisfy themselves at the expense of others? And so there's all different kind of people out there, and so you have to be careful how you go through life. So it's a very good point.
I mean, I think that a lot of times, though, someone that sort of can control people, and that's what Bonnie saw. It was like a high control group. When you're in a high control group, and she's like, that's when I Googled high control group, and I wanted to leave because I was in a high control group. Let's Google, or let's Wikipedia, high control group. And let's take a look at it, okay? Oh, wait,
Okay.
What happened? Oh, high control group redirects to cult on Wikipedia. So I'll just Google it.
Just go to cult. A cult, actually, the Wikipedia says a cult is a social group that is defined by its unusual religious, spiritual, or philosophical beliefs, or by its common interest in a particular personality, object, or goal. That's a very good, simple explanation of a cult. A social group. That's very true. It's social.
Here's a long blog post by secularliturgies.wordpress.com. So I can't vouch for this, but characteristics of high control and cult groups. There is opposition to critical thought. Number 1.
Interesting.
Self-doubt is encouraged. We saw this a lot in NXIVM, right?
Yes.
So it's like, I have some reservations about putting my life on hold and moving to Albany and putting my life savings into NXIVM. And Keith would say, that's just your fear talking. Do you want to live in fear, or do you want to live in joy? And they're like, yeah, I guess it is just my fear talking. And Laura pointed this out when we were watching the documentary. Fear is good. Fear is an instinct that we've developed, through evolution to warn us of danger. And in his teachings, he was saying your fear is what's keeping you from joy. But the thing about fear is that it's a highly honed evolutionary process that sort of allows you beyond reason to say, I'm afraid and I don't quite know why, but that fear is my instinct telling me that there's danger here. And the danger sometimes you're afraid and you accept the danger and something good happens. But more often than not, you're afraid because what you're doing is dangerous and reckless and it's going to hurt you. So you should be afraid of doing it. And then you don't do it. But to sort of make fear as a blanket bad thing that you have to avoid, or, you have to confront always. I'm afraid that quitting my job and joining this cult and giving you all my money is bad. That's just your fear. That's asinine. But it makes sense at the time when you're in the cult, right?
Which, yes, but looking at it objectively here, which is a very good point, David, notice that we three were watching this, and Laura had her perspective, and that this is what I think, and so do we say, no, that's not right? We go, well, we understand what you're saying. And you're right. Because there's not opposition to critical thought. No, there's not.
And self-doubt is discouraged.
That's right. If you don't want to do it, there may be something there. As a matter of fact, the doubt, when people have doubt, when people have fear, even around you, sometimes you don't see things other people do. And even in that, it says, oh, I don't know, this doesn't sound right. Be careful. And they will warn you because they might see things you don't. Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, I should take you and Michael out with me and a couple of times I remember you guys would say, hey, that, I remember one time one of my people I was talking to, and you and Mike were saying, I don't like that person. He says, he's nice. He's nice. And I just don't like how he talks. Oh, okay. But from then on, I was very careful with that person. And I was I watched out for it. And maybe this is stretching it here. But anyway, fear, doubt is healthy for you and evil people around you who love you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we saw that in NXIVM, because they really cared about people who were going down the hill. Listen to people who really care about you.
Yeah. I like, one of my favorite scenes is when Mark tells his mom that he's quitting NXIVM. And she is just like, oh, you wasted 10 years of your life in that stupid group. I'm so glad that you left.
She knew from the beginning, probably.
Yeah. Magical thinking is prevalent. That's number 3. We saw that, Kurt, right?
See, what did you Google this? What'd you Google?
Oh, let me just put it in chat. How does that sound?
Okay. $25 signs you're in a high control group. Wow.
It's
interesting.
It's just some lady's blog, but I think it looks like she did a lot of work on this. So shout out to Anastasia Somerville Wong and her blog secularliturgies.wordpress.com, because it's allowing us to sort of delve deeper into the mechanics behind Keith Raniere's control of his bizarre volleyball sex cult practitioners.
Yeah.
So here,
shout out to Anastasia. Good job, Anastasia.
Magical thinking is prevalent. We see that. That's why I bristle when people, they adopt holistic or homeopathic remedies for things. They believe in cures or medicines or practices that aren't really backed by science. I'm skeptical of all of that. Because, I don't know. I mean, I think that people spend lots of money on things that aren't real. And that's one thing I love about Mark Cuban on the Shark Tank.
I was thinking him too.
When someone has, this is a miracle cure. He's like, no, it's not. Like, get out of here. He hates quacks that promote things as, if you wear this copper wristband, you won't get cancer. He's like, get out of my sight. Like, that's not how it works.
I don't buy that. I don't buy that.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, he will not buy it.
Yeah.
He's on Shark Tank.
Leaders claim to have special insight and supreme knowledge. We saw that with Keith Raniere, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the crazy thing is, because did you watch the Dr. Todd Grande video I showed you about Keith Raniere? So he went to one of your alma maters. He went to RPI. And they said, he's got a 280 IQ. He's the smartest man on the planet. And there's records there. And Todd Grande was like, I looked into his records, and he had a 2.1 GPA. He didn't even graduate. Like, the smartest man in the world can't get an A in undergraduate courses? I mean, RPI is a good school, but
my GPA was higher than his.
Yeah. Maybe you should have started a cult. But then you'd be in prison now, right?
No, I wouldn't do what he did.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do that. If I had a cult right now, if I had thousands of people following me, I think what would happen within a year is all of those people who followed me would be dispersed and doing their own thing. Because I want people to be happy doing their own thing.
Yeah, spread your wings and fly.
Spread your wings and fly. Don't come in here. Go out there. If you come in here and you stay in this cage, your wings will get tired and go away. You got to fly and anyway.
The leadership is authoritarian, charismatic, and narcissistic. Who does that sound like?
Yeah.
Is there a political leader that reminds you of?
Well, what's scary is that this, you're talking about Trump, but you're scary because this really does happen. It has happened in the past, and I think it's been happening today.
I think you could say I'm talking about Trump, but you could also say I'm talking about Vladimir Putin, Xi Jinping, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, Rodrigo Duterte, Viktor Orban, Jair Bolsonaro. There are a lot of authoritarian, narcissistic, charismatic leaders in the world today, more than there were 20 years ago.
Well, you gave examples of what I was trying to say what I was not trying to say, but trying to articulate. You articulated it much better. It has happened. It's happening today, and it will happen in the future. It's something that you have to always be on guard because it's always going to happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And charismatic. I mean, like the lady along number 5 here, the lady that you brought up was crying. I think you showed it on this podcast. She's crying, says, Trump, save us.
Oh, yeah.
Save us. Trump, save us. Save us. Trump, save. Okay, what do you mean? What are you calling him to save us? We have a whole country here. We have a Congress, and she's calling to one person to save him. Well, that's exactly what number 5 is saying. The leadership. That's the only one who can save you.
Mm-hmm. Number 6, leaders are not accountable to other authorities. That's interesting because I think they said Keith Raniere set it up so that nothing was in his name. And he thought that would protect him from any liability from the legal authorities. Which is fascinating, you know?
Well, hey, David, you know what I think of when I see this?
What?
Religious groups.
Yeah?
And if religious groups say, yes, you do what I say because God is on your side. And everyone who's not with us is against us. And so they claim God is on their side, so therefore anything they say goes.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's a religious cult. And I don't care what you call it. I don't care what denomination it is. I don't care what, okay, boy, am I getting, I'm saying out there exactly what I feel. And some people say, oh, that's heresy. Yeah, in your church, it's heresy because when you claim authority above any, when you say God is on your side, you're claiming authority above God because you're saying you are more powerful than God.
Yeah.
You know, and so I back when I was younger, that was one of the first things that I said, no, this isn't right. He says, you can't just say I'm right and they're wrong, you know, because God is God of everyone. And so when they start claiming that God is on their side and God is not on your side, they're saying, I'm a God.
Mm-hmm.
And I began saying that, not in some of the organizations I was in, but a lot of the people in the organizations were claiming it.
Yeah.
And so it's a very easy to people start to do, but then no, they're just trying to control you.
Yeah, where you
and
think you think you're an apostle, but you're actually a Pharisee. Right?
You think you're an apostle, you're really yeah, that's true. Well, that's right. Actually, that's very true.
I mean, are you behaving like the apostles, or are you behaving like the Pharisees?
Are you a disciple or an apostle or disciple, or are you a Pharisee?
Yeah.
That's right. You're right.
There are draconian... go ahead.
And a lot of churches today who mean well, without them really thinking about it or knowing it, they're moving in that direction. More of a Pharisee than an apostle or a follower of Jesus.
Yeah, or they moved in that direction 75 years ago, 100 years ago, 200 years ago.
It's always been that way.
They've always been the Pharisees.
It'll always be that way. And there'll always be people like that.
Yeah.
And so you have to always be on the lookout. You're not going to solve this thing you have to just always be on the lookout and protect yourself and protect those you love.
Mm-hmm.
What's the next one? 7?
There are draconian and intrusive rules for members. We saw that with the branding of his initials on the girls' pubises. That was that's one thing, but a lot of it is he restricted their calories. He would call them at all hours of the night, and then he'd have his his minions do it as well. I hate to say disciples, his minions. That's a better word, right?
With followers. I think they were called followers in the
documentary.
The documentary we saw, in the movie we saw.
The leaders are above the law. So it's do as I say, not as I do, right? Like sort of like with Elijah Muhammad. It's, you have to be a strict Muslim, but I'm going to stash girls all over the city and, go have extramarital sex with them.
Even the Christian religion, David, stories of saying, this is how you should behave, and then they get caught.
Oh, Ted Haggart, a Colorado legend, Ted Haggart. Let's take a look at his story, why don't we?
Number 8, Haggart, yeah. Is that the one?
Ted Haggart, evangelical pastor from the New Life Church in Colorado Springs. Practically our backyard. He was a big, if you're gay, you're going to hell type of guy, saying the Lord hates nothing more than homosexuals, and his church would cheer him on. And then in November 26th, he got caught with a male prostitute doing methamphetamines in a truck stop bathroom, and it's like, oh, do as I say, not as I do, right?
There you go.
Do you think
it's always it's happened in the past? It's happening today. It'll keep happening in the future. Some things don't change.
Do you think a lot of the vitriol, the rage with which you say homosexuality is bad, can be attributed to the fact that he was gay?
I'm sure there's some psychological things around that, right? Someone who knows more about that and psychosis than I do.
I would feel
probably
like
so.
If he were, because he was gay and his religion was saying that being gay is bad, he came down on it extra hard. And he's like, if I say it extra loud, God will forgive me when I go to this truck top bathroom and have sex with this guy on crystal meth. Whereas someone who is confidently and securely heterosexual would say, well, there's stuff in the Bible that would indicate that, God has a less than accepting attitude of homosexuality, but, it's not even one of the commandments. Like, have no other gods before him. Don't commit adultery. Focus on those first. Don't kill anyone. Don't steal. Honor your mother and father. Why are you focusing whole sermons on this when it's not even one of the commandments,
There's no commandment, thou shalt not be homosexual.
Yeah.
So the point is, it's a very good point. I think there's some psychology in there that some people when they are speaking loudly about something, maybe they're hiding something that they do.
Yeah.
So kind of like, wow, when you're really enraged about something, or no, when you're not enraged, but when something's bigger than life, maybe there's a reason for it.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you're doing it,
The flow of information is subject to censorship and control. We saw this in NXIVM. People would leave, and then they would say, Keith stole all my money, and I'm going to try to get it back. And they would file a flurry of lawsuits against him and say, we're going to just bankrupt you with lawsuits because we have the Bronfman money. But they would tell everyone in NXIVM, oh, they betrayed us. They betrayed us. They had an opportunity on January 6th to vote to overturn the election, and Mike Pence didn't do it. He betrayed us. He's persona non grata. Did you know that in the straw poll at CPAC, Trump, and of course CPAC is not the Republican Party, but Trump was the odds-on favorite to be the 2024 nominee for the Republican Party, and Mike Pence got less than 5% of the vote. Because he didn't overturn the election,
So is the CPAC or Trump, is that a cult?
CPAC is I would say the most wacko conservatives that didn't rub poop on the walls of the Capitol. You know? The whole group is elitist with an elite inner circle at its core. I think you have to do that. I've read about this before. You have to create an us versus them mentality to make someone join a cult. Like, the rest of the world doesn't understand what we're doing. What we're doing is important. And when someone says, like Mark Vicente's mom, when she says, you got to get out of that cult, it's crazy, you're wasting your time. He says, you don't understand what we're doing is important. And I think that's a very necessary facet of establishing a cult, is establishing an us versus them mentality. So the group as a whole has to be elitist. And then, of course, the leaders are even more elitist than the group members.
Mm-hmm. There's a hierarchy.
Mm-hmm. Threats are made against members who leave. We saw that in NXIVM.
Very much so.
Outsiders and outsider groups are slandered and vilified. Yes.
If you're not with me, it's kind of like, I mean, this is a stretch, a little bit of a stretch. But when Trump was asked about John Lewis, was it, what he did for the blacks? He goes, yeah, but no one has done more for blacks than me. He goes, well, don't you think, you can't remember exactly what the question was, like, don't you think John Lewis was a great man, though? And so he said, his answer was, he didn't come to my inauguration. It's very interesting. So it's not that he was vilified, but he's slandered. Like, he's not with me.
Mm-hmm. So
it doesn't matter what he does. He's not with me.
Yeah. Who cares that he laid his life on the line to advance the cause? Like, he's not with me now, so he's persona non grata. Members become increasingly isolated from former companions.
Aha.
That's a cult thing for sure. Your whole life becomes the network of the cult.
That's what I mean by the family. And also in NXIVM, a lot of the parents go, oh, no, my children. And the children didn't listen to the parents who love them.
Mm-hmm. The group identity takes precedence or replaces the individual identity. I think you can see this, though, not just in cults, but in relationships.
That's true. Whoa. That's a good point, David. Wow. Are you talking about marriage?
Oh, yeah. Or, if someone has a controlling girlfriend or spouse or boyfriend or husband, and you talk to them about their lives, and you might have known them, let's say, in high school before they got married, and they were an individual, and now their life is, yes, they've lost their individuality. Their life is the group, the two of them, if that makes sense,
Yeah. Well, if we're going to get into, I like to get into marriage a little bit. What I've noticed, because marriage is becoming important in our family, and that is you have to retain your individuality, but also you have to also understand the other person has to retain their individuality, okay, when you have a partner. But then you have an identity together and you have identity apart. And so you have to have both of those to be healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens in a lot of times when people come together in a partnership, that they lose their identity in the other person, and that's not good. And then they retain their identity superior to the identity as a partnership. That's not good.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to have a balance between those. And who teaches you that,
Yeah, well, if your identity is fundamentally inseparable from the relationship, you're not going to handle a breakup very well.
No, not at all. I remember when I was in high school, and I don't know why I was this way, but when you're in high school, oh, yeah, I have a boyfriend. I have a girlfriend. Oh, Bobby's my boyfriend. You leave him alone. Susie's my girlfriend. You leave her alone. You know, I hated that.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
What?
WordPress. Oh.
Oh, we're frozen. My video's frozen. Wait, no, we're not. We're good.
Okay. Anyway, I hated that because I go, wait a minute, I am me. Don't connect me with this girl over here just because she says I'm her boyfriend. And some of those crazy girls I never even went on a date with.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was nice to them. Oh, hi, how are you? Oh, fine. You know, okay, boom. Well, that doesn't mean I'm yours now.
Mm-hmm.
I hated that.
Yeah.
You need to keep your identity. But if you get married, then you have an identity together, but you also need an identity separately.
You need to retain your individuality. You can't be the couple. I mean, I think that you have to be yourself and the couple.
Yeah, that's right. And that there's a balance there.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, you can't lose yourself in a couple.
Yeah. Okay. Or in a group of people, like in a cult.
In a cult. That's 14. What's 15?
15. The group performed secret rites and rituals. We saw that with NXIVM. They were branding Keith Raniere's initials on girls. Moving on, let's finish this list real quick, and then we'll sort of wrap it up with one question that I have. In general, their events involve mind-altering practices, whether that's, ritualistic or it's restricting calories and sleep. Yes, we saw that. Members frequently experience feelings of shame, guilt, fear, and dread. Yeah, if you're feeling those feelings, you're not really getting closer to joy. But you'll be told that you are getting closer to joy in an NXIVM environment. Zealous commitment, loyalty, and dependence upon their leader. What does that sound like?
Yeah.
Groups have a preoccupation with new members and proselytizing. They did that. Sarah Edmondson started the Vancouver office, and she was a great recruiter. And the reason why she moved up the ranks is because she was so good at getting other people to join. And that's it's like a spiritual pyramid scheme where, you get to be ahead of a branch. And if you bring people into you're like a good salesman for the pyramid scheme. Target the vulnerable with love bombing and idealistic goals. Do you want to have joy? Of course you do. I like in The Office when Michael Scott says, do you want your life to be better, to be worse, or do you want it to stay the same? And all of his employees say, stay the same. Because they know he's going to try to sell them on something they don't want.
Uh-huh.
We're almost there. Financial or economic exploitation. We saw that in NXIVM. Punitive punishment, even physical abuse. Evidence of sexual exploitation. I was telling my friend Ian, we had lunch yesterday. Have you seen The Vow? And no, it's this documentary about this cult. He promises people the world, and it turns out to be this weird sex thing. And Ian's like, it's always a weird sex thing. And women especially are tightly controlled. And we saw that too. Oh, finally, deception is normalized and the ends always justify the means. That's all of them. What do you think of that list?
I think Anastasia really thought a lot about this. I think she's very smart and very perceptive. And I think this is a very good list. But I think that secular liturgies, I think it's important to, I got a feeling about the list, like the list is great, by the way. Again, shout out, congratulations to Anastasia for putting this together. It's very good. But also my thought is, these are just observations. And the observations are only valuable when a person can use them in real life. And so in order for these to be beneficial, you have to have a system of support, social support, some kind of a support that these can be used effectively and positively. In other words, knowledge of them is not the same as actually benefiting from them in life.
Yes.
Okay.
But
so I guess I don't know how to say that right, but connecting it to your life.
But I would say that knowledge of this stuff is important. I feel like Bonnie, she was the one that she was told she was in a high control group. She Googled it. She might have gotten an article just like this. And she said, oh my God, NXIVM ticks all these boxes. But you also have to not be so deep into it that's like, well, this is for other people. This is for Jim Jones, not NXIVM. You know, you could read it and dismiss it out of hand because of irrationality. And a lot of that is magical thinking. I think that knowing this stuff is fascinating because people, they always try to sell you a bill of goods. Your car salesman wants you to buy that Corvette when you're 50 so that you're driving around because you want to feel young again. But the thing is, you'll spend 45 grand on a Corvette. You'll drive it off the lot and you'll still be 50.
You're still going to be 50.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you see what I mean? And it's like, it's the magical thinking that they convince you into. And at some point you have to tell yourself, no, I'm going to kind of look pathetic to be, you know, middle-aged, slightly past middle-aged and driving around in a Corvette. Like, or also if that's who you are, you know who I am? I'm old guy Corvette guy, like, and I embrace that. That's fine. But if it's I want to recapture my youth, and then it's like a hollow, a Pyrrhic victory. You spend all this money and you're driving around a Corvette, and you still have hemorrhoids and a bad back. Like, you're not going to be young again because you bought the Corvette, and like you should understand why you're doing things, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to talk about one more thing because we've gone an hour before we go, because it's in the thumbnail.
Well, before you go, I was going to say, before you say that, I think what you said, David, was excellent. These things should be talked about, and these should be known. These should be explained. Everyone should see these things and judge everything that they do relative to these knowledge. Am I being controlled? Am I being this? Am I being that? I think it's good for everyone to know these things, and then apply them to your lives as you live. I think that was excellent, David. We all need to know these things. These things should be taught. What Anastasia did here, or other types of liturgies, this should be taught. This is what children should be seeing here. Mm-hmm. So what were you going to say now?
So before we wrap up, because I put it in the thumbnail, we got to talk a little bit about the volleyball.
Okay.
I want to pull up, let's see if I can pull up a clip of the volleyball scene. Okay, yeah, they have Allison Mack meeting Keith Raniere. Allison Mack was an actor from Smallville, and she was like the ringleader of the sex slave part of NXIVM. And I guess I never saw Smallville. I think that I'm a little too old for it, but it's like a Superman thing. I don't know. But she was the biggest star because she was a star on this network show called Smallville, and she got roped into NXIVM, and she full sent NXIVM. And so this is her getting entranced by Keith Raniere at the volleyball court. And then I'll tell you what I said when I saw this for the first time.
Now, here's a video that's really interesting. It's a video of Keith Raniere.
Is that important to you? Yes. Why? Why is that important to me? Because it's, I think it's, because so much of who I am is wrapped up in art.
Give me an example.
When I go to see a film or a piece of artwork or something happens to me, I'm just so excited and one blissful, joyful.
You know, you can practice generating an extreme feeling of joy over anything. Mm-hmm. In our methods that we have, especially in 2C. It's one of our intensives. What's it called now? Civilization? Civilization?
What if artistic endeavors were really bogus? What if
What if art was just an excuse for those who couldn't build?
It is sometimes.
The most excitement that you've ever felt is yours to have all the time, independent of art. The bad news is you sort of have to divorce yourself from the thought that it comes from the art. If you feel that art is necessary for that, that's almost a self-condemnation. Why is this so much?
All right. There's a lot to unpack there, but when that scene aired, do you remember what I told you guys?
No. What'd you say?
I said, if I ever sacrifice my independence to some dork in a headband and knee pads on a volleyball court, I want you guys to shoot me in the face. That's what I said. It's a bunch of gobbledygook, right?
Yeah, it was.
But the volleyball thing, it's just, I don't know. It's like I was talking about a Corvette. A Corvette won't make you cool. But a Corvette is cooler than knee pads and a headband walking around on a volleyball court. It's the dorkiest thing. I just want to play. Of course, this is not the best, but this is the guy. This is the guy you're going to trust with your life? Look at how dorky he is. He's the biggest goober in the history of Earth. And you're going to sacrifice your independence to this guy? Knee pad volleyball guy? I don't know. But in the show, they played volleyball, and he would be like, volleyball. And they would play from 10 at night until 3 in the morning. And it just blew my mind that could be something you incorporate into your doctrine. And anyone is on board with it. Volleyball is not cool. That's my feeling anyway.
Well, he used it effectively. And what was her name again?
Allison Mack.
Allison. She's young. She was young and talented, and she had feelings about, she loved art, and that was what she liked. And so he used that to convince her to move away from something that would probably make her happy.
Yeah. The first thing he did was to say, what do you love in this world? And he's like, well, there's other ways to achieve that love. And that way is in 2C, one of our classes. Why don't you come on board and start paying me money? And then she got hook, line, and sinker. She's in jail now for being part of that cult and being one of the henchmen. And I feel a little bit bad for her, but also she committed crimes. So,
yeah.
I feel bad for the criminal, but I feel worse for the victims.
Yeah, but if she hadn't have met Keith Raniere, would she be in jail?
No, I doubt it.
I doubt it too, and that's sad. It's really sad that she didn't deserve that. But so that's why he's in jail. Mm-hmm. But she did do it. So again, be very careful going down different paths.
So
anyway, this has been good.
Yep, and I think we can wrap it up here. The last thing I want to say is, I'll say it at once, I'll say it again. If I ever sacrifice my independence to some dork in a headband and knee pads, you guys just take me out to pasture and shoot me, okay? On a volleyball court. So do you have anything you'd like to close with? I'll cue up the Talking Leaf theme. And allow you to close the show.
Okay. I think this is really good information. It should be information that everyone should know. So keep on talking, but listen more than you talk and try to understand what the other person is saying. Bye.